Yo, what's up, guys? Ed CCG here, and I won. I won the Genesys Invitational Qualifier. I did do a deck profile on Pack's channel, but this is a little bit different. I wanted to go a little bit more in depth on the deck, why I did certain choices and what I think about the format. So yeah, I won a Dark End. Obviously, I don't have it with me. I won a Giant Pot of Greed, you'll see in the thumbnail. And you know, it was a really fun tournament, met some really good people, everyone was really nice, and I think we have a bright future ahead for the game, especially in Genesys format. So yeah, let's take a look at the list, and let's begin. So we got 3 Raisin, obviously you have to play 3 of this card, 3 Mad Love, obvious, starter, and then you play 3 Holy Sue, obvious, 3 Jhon, and then something that maybe is like a little weird, but 3 Caesar, or 3 Burger, 3 Caesar. You're not gonna do the whole thing. But you know, Jhon, Caesar, and three of all these might be a little strange to some people, but you also have to consider that this format, there's no rock, there's no links, right? So you need as much in-engine recursion as possible, and these cards are all like very valuable, right? The pop from this is really important. The dark attribute from Burger is extremely important. Having as many fires in your hand as possible with Jhon is extremely important as well. Like, you just want to maximize on the amount of like Vanquishable names you draw, as that's, you know, the heart and soul of the deck. Like, there's not that many consistency cards you can play, and I try to play as many as possible. So it's just really important to have all the cards. Also, you'll notice throughout the video, I'm only playing in attribute like cards. I'm not playing like any, like, you know, I'm not maining a Droll, for example, specifically because I want the attributes to align with my deck, and that also ties into why I played so many of the names. So it's pretty important in my opinion. Next, I played 3 Impulse. And 1 Fire Techer. So I saw some random decks were sprinkling this inside of the Genesys. Like, I always play like a deck that shouldn't be playing Impulse, and they were playing Impulse. Maybe presumably because it's a good card. I'm not sure how much I agree with that, but I will say in this deck especially, it is very, very valuable because they are fires. There are so many times where I literally wouldn't use this card on purpose because I needed the fire in my hand. That is how valuable the fire attribute is. And also, if you can activate it and, like, you know, summon it, draw into a Holy Sue, you will win the game. Like, this card is absolutely broken. I had a match. This card resolved 3 separate times. The game was over. Like, the guy couldn't even compete. It's really broken. These cards are just insanely good. Also, the attribute, especially in this deck, is very important. I would maybe recommend siding this in depending on like what deck you're playing. It's like a general like side deck card, or maybe even a main deck card, like some other opponents did. But it's hard to say. But overall, this card's pretty solid. Then I played 1 Raiden. So initially I was playing more Raiden, I was siding a bunch of Kaijus, right? But something that was interesting about this event is there's day 1 qualifiers, right? Even on day 2 they had some qualifiers, but you didn't have to play the same main deck, or same deck for qualifiers and the finals, right? So day 1, I play a couple, like 5 Kaijus in a side deck, right? And I look around and I'm not seeing many decks that Kaijus are beneficial against. And it kind of makes sense. Like, initially going into the format, I was really concerned about decks like Lunalite, Pearly, stuff like that, as those can make like big towers that you really can't interact with. But you know, when it really came down to it, like, Kaijus were the only free non-engine in the entire format, and so it's pretty obvious that people are going to be playing these cards in a side deck. So inherently, those decks are even worse because, you know, everyone's playing it out to like their best card. And I mained 1 of this because it is a dark, and like I mentioned, dark is a really hard card to find like quality cards for. You'll notice here, like, I played 3 DD Crow, and this card was extremely subpar. Honestly, there's not that many graveyard decks in the format really at the current moment, at least that I played. And you know, the main purpose of this was to banish like an MST so they didn't have a negate or something. Like, the main reason you want to play these cards is because they're darks, and I can't stress it enough. There's not enough darks in this deck, and not enough quality dark cards to play because there's just, you know, no Jokos or anything that are free. So yeah. Also, this card is kind of nice. You could, like, it never came up, but you could search it with Small World, like Kaiju, and you know, there's some other niche things like that. So it did come up to, like, you know, tribute summon like a Holy Sue or something in the format, but it was fine. I'd probably still play 1 if I could play the deck again. Next, 3 Ash. One thing that's really interesting about Ash, obviously it's a fire attribute, which, you know, as you can see, the whole deck is around these attributes. But also, obviously, Ash is a broken card. It's funny to explain playing Ash in the deck, but you really have to, because a lot of my opponents were like, literally, I had a Blue Eyes opponent joke that he's saying when you activate Wishes, like, oh yeah, good thing no one's playing Ash. And I'm looking at my hand like, where's my Ash, right? But like, a lot of decks cannot afford to play Ash. This is an expensive card in the format, and it's probably not worth it in most game states because you want to commit your points to an engine, right? There's 2 different routes you can go down about building a deck. You can build a deck that has a lot of like in-engine points, or a deck that has a lot of non-engine points, right? This deck is obviously an outlier because the engine was too low, frankly. But yeah, basically Ash is extremely impactful because a lot of the decks are a lot lower quality. So, you know, even an Ash is extremely high impact, as opposed to like the modern format, right? So Ash is a really good card in the format. That's that. Next for the spells, play 3 Stake Your Soul, 3 Pot of Extravagance, 2 Small World, and then 1 of each. So, Pot of Extravagance, extremely broken. I don't know how this is 0 points. You'll notice a lot of the top performing decks were decks that could abuse Pot of Extravagance, and that makes sense, right? It's one of the best 0 point cards you can play. You obviously want to play decks that abuse the most 0 point cards you can play. Small World was another really good card at 0 points. I'm not sure it should be points, but you know, there's a lot of different bridges you can do in this deck to get to Engine, to get the hand traps. There's a game state I searched an Ash against a Draco Tail opponent in Genesys, right? And that was just game, right? It was an attribute I needed for the search guy, and also it was an Ash boss against Draco Tail. Like, how are they going to compete? So these cards are really good. Maybe I'd even consider playing 7th Tachyon as a search target for like Raisin and stuff, but that's hard to say. There's also some other cards here. Like I play Continue. Initially my deck played 2 Continue, but through playing the, you know, a little bit more rounds, I realized I never really had an opportunity to search this card, just because when I was summoning off of Holy Suit, it was never really a Mad Love. It was most of the time a Raisin in the column, right? So searching this, you know, the first or second Continue never really came up. Frankly, the 1 Continue in my deck didn't really, you know, matter that much, but it was nice to have. You know, some people were considering playing like multiples of these or these. I don't know if that was correct. I liked the 1-1. There also was a lot of game states where I couldn't activate Start just because, you know, it's a really like poppable card. You had to wait for the back row to be popped and whatnot. There's also a concern, like going into day 2, one of the cards I thought could like really break the mirror match in this deck was Vados, right? In the normal combo line for the mirror match and Vanquish Soul, you obviously get to the field spell pretty much every turn, and if you have a Vados, you can literally completely like win you the game. So it was a genuine concern that if I played a mirror match and my opponent had Vados, which I was hoping no one knew about, that I would literally lose the game outright because they Vados popped my field spell. So there's a lot of like weird interactions that like, you would never expect a Vados to be a concern, but it was one of the only good dark 0 point hand traps that you could possibly play in the mirror match, which is a very hard, you know, deck to prepare for. So onto the side deck, guys. People online were like making fun of me, like, how do you have 3 Umbra Roar? Like, I didn't own any of these cards, any of the, you know, Umbra Roars at least. I borrowed them. I also didn't really use the extra deck at all. Like, this deck is just so broken. Like, you didn't need to use the extra deck. I had plenty of opponents and like people I just saw walking around, or they're playing matches where like summoning Honor Arcs and Exciton Knights and whatnot. But like, you really don't need that. Like, the main deck's so broken, you never want to commit 2 rank 5s pretty much almost ever into an XYZ, or, you know, 2 rank 4s. You'd rather just have those bodies on board or in hand. There were some specific game states where I did have rank 5s that I overlaid, only because I maybe had another Holy Suit in hand or Jhon in hand to really, you know, boost that the benefit, right? So for the extra deck, I played 3 Umbra Ore. I think I gave back some of the cards, but 3 Nash Knight, or 3 Sea Nash Knight, 3 Nash Knight, 3 104, and 3 Valon. I literally only summoned the Nash Knight stuff into Umbra Ore. That's the only thing I summoned, and every single time I summoned it, it didn't resolve. You didn't need an extra deck. Obviously, something I can consider was 7th Tachyon in this deck, because it's also 0 points. So maybe that was a better play in hindsight, but this was fine how it was. Now for the side deck, these are things that are a little interesting. A lot of people have this philosophy that if you're going to commit points to your deck, they should be in the main deck. That was what a lot of people told me. That's what a lot of people suggested. But while that may seem true for most decks in the format, a lot of the cards that I wanted to play that were quality weren't in the attribute lineup that I wanted. Like, for example, I saw some very good players were playing, like, for example, like Fualos and stuff, right? And that makes sense. But in my head, like, Fualos is such like a niche card that doesn't have a lot of impact against a lot of decks. Like, for example, Odion was really popular. And other decks didn't really summon that much from the extra deck. That I didn't want to commit to playing those cards when I didn't know they'd have guaranteed value. And even if I played a card that didn't have guaranteed value, such as a Kaiju, I knew its attribute would be valuable. So the only card maybe I consider is a Meowless, because it's an Earth. But I really didn't need more Earths in the deck. So, I mean, more of the story is you don't need to play, like, you know, heavy impact cards, especially in a deck like this, because they don't fit the attribute. But I did want to say I did play point cards in the side deck, right? And why did I play a card like Droll? My whole philosophy is not to play, you know, non-Earth Dark Fires, right? Droll is such a high impact card against all these, like, frankly, BS decks, right? There's a lot of decks that I was concerned maybe someone would find some kind of FTK. The Exodia was running around. I don't know if any topped, I don't know if any made finals, but Exodia was a deck that is like viable to play. That has like, I don't know what the consistency rate is. The number 90% was running around. I'm not sure if that's true, but more of the story is Exodia was a real threat. There's also a Fable deck that Jackie was playing. I was scared to death to play that deck. I didn't know what it did, what it ended on. I looked over at her field once, and it was the most broken 5 cards and like 10 cards in hand that I've ever seen. And I'm like, all right, well, Droll has to stop that. I also played Book of Eclipse because it is one of the only cards that I could think of at the time to deal with the mirror match. If you Book of Eclipse the board, unless they have a Holy Suit in hand, which most of the time they don't, they will lose. It is really broken because a lot of the end boards end on 4-5 monsters. It's really hard to out. Even Droll has that same instance. Like, it really helps in the mirror match, and it's really, really impactful, especially against the unfair decks. So those are the reasons I sided point cards. I also didn't think any of these fit in the main deck. Other cards I sided were 3 Flying Sea. Shout out Paul. Flying Sea was something I was considering against Onomat. Onomat was a somewhat popular matchup. I was also somewhat worried about decks like Pearly and whatnot. Ironically enough, my deck is like an 100-0 Pearly matchup from the Kaiju's Flying Sea, XYZ Encore. But these were decks in the format that I was worried about, so Flying Sea could really help. Also, I'm not sure how much it would have worked. I would have to test it more, but VFD was a problem. That's also why I played the XYZ Encore. These cards, like this against like Exodia, right? Or not Exodia. This against Exorcister. This against VFD. Like these cards had really high impact against specific matchups that I was worried about. For the most part, like I literally joked to my friends that I didn't want to sign up with a side deck just to like war farm, right? The deck doesn't need a side deck, so you can literally side cards specifically for like crazy matchups that you otherwise wouldn't win. So that's the exact reason I played XYZ Encore and Flying Sea for like VFD and like maybe Exorcist or Onomat, any of these crazy unfair decks. Other event in the side deck, I played 3 Cosmic and 1 Pantera. Multiple of my opponents, and even in my main deck initially, I played Pantera, but I realized it's not really a necessary card at all, right? Pantera it's a niche card. It's an Earth attribute, which you really don't need, and its pop effect did come up. I will say I did summon it post-side off Holy Suit of pop cards, so it served its purpose. It was fine. Cosmic Cyclone, obviously pretty good. Like a lot of decks like MST, Odeon, all these different decks are running around where Cosmic is really broken. I also eventually started siding it against In the Mirror, a couple copies of it, because really the only threat in the Mirror was the back row, and if you can clear the back row with a field spell, then your matchup was significantly improved. So yeah, honestly, I think Genesys was really cool. Konami's doing a lot of hard work to really make sure the format's perfect. I'm not sure the name, but one of the Konami representatives actually interviewed everyone who won a pod to really understand like how the players were feeling about the format, and it really showed like a first step that Konami was taking to make sure this format like prevails. Also, they recorded a lot of content for Genesys. I think all my matches from top 16, 8, 4 finals, all of them were recorded. They're supposed to be on stream, but I'm not sure if that's going to happen. They will be uploading not only my gameplay, but a lot of different people's gameplay from the event. They had 2 different side stream tables where they recorded God knows how many matches of Genesys. This is a format they want to push. This is a format that they plan to constantly update, and I think they said every 4 to 6 weeks, and it's something you guys should try out. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please subscribe and enjoy.